Hey guys, Nicholai here, giving a initial feedback and reaction to Cliffe Knechtle, who is, you know, going to be reacting to this. Jay is the channel that I saw this on. I can't find it on Twitter, so we're gonna have to use Jay. Jay's gonna make some commentary as well, which I will follow up with, but for the most part, we're just gonna react to the video at hand. So let's go ahead and do this.
So tell us what the real Bible is. Tell us.
I would say that the Bible, which is the Septuagint, the one that the apostles held to, is the one that is the true Bible.
Yeah, so immediately Cliff is very dismissive in his attitude. He's not taking to being challenged by another Christian well. He's more interested in just kind of this very surface level Christianity, this very surface level defense of the faith, which is, of course, a ludicrous notion that you can just have like the bare minimum Christianity. Like Christianity is this thing where there's this minimum threshold you have to meet. No, Christianity demands high things from us. It demands a lot from us. And people get bent out of shape because they kind of start getting into the works and they start accusing it of being works just because Christ is the one who demands these things of us. And so when he says immediately, well, that's the Old Testament. Well, the Old Testament is the canon of Scripture that the apostles would have had access to. It's the apostle that is the canon of Scripture that they would have appealed to when preaching the gospel to the world. They would have referenced the Septuagint. They wouldn't have referenced Paul's and Peter's letters when they haven't been written yet. So Cliff is getting a complete incoherent message from this all. And shout out to Orthodox Loner. Cliff gets defensive when challenged on the Old Testament canon. It is quite amazing to see that he is immediately dismissive. And by the way, these are the so-called nice guy Christians. These are the guys that go around and lovingly will walk people through a very like surface level Christianity. Very, very amazing to watch.
Right, but the apostles, when they were spreading the gospel,
yes,
which is, by the way, the oral gospel, of course, written way later.
Stick your point.
Okay.
Come on, look at this like snide posture, where he's like leaning in as if talking down to a child. His disposition is entirely wrong here. Come on, stick to your point. He's giving context, and it would have only taken about 5 more seconds, but now he's rushing him. And by the way, based on the conversation that this gentleman calls in, this is after Cliff's son is unable to actually engage with these things.
The Septuagint is the Bible that the church held to, which Protestants.
No, it's the Old Testament. Before the New Testament was written, Cliff, the Old Testament was the standard canon of Scripture that everyone would have used. And what is that canon that they used? They quote almost exclusively from the Septuagint. Okay, they don't go to the Masoretics. They don't go to these other things. They go almost exclusively to the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, which was written prior to Christ. Okay, so it wasn't like some innovation or anything like that. Like the Greek Old Testament was the lingua franca of that era and of that region that they were initially spreading in. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't Hebrew. It was Aramaic and Greek. Those were the two primary languages that were spreading in that region at the time. So Cliff's like entire dismissive attitude here is just telling. And he kind of just eventually dismisses him, but we'll watch it.
The Septuagint is the Old Testament. I'm not talking about the New Testament. That's a strong.
Well, where do you find out about Jesus?
Where do you find out about Jesus? In the Old Testament. Those are the Old Testament points to Christ. The apostles may have written the New Testament to reaffirm these things and to address certain heresies that were spreading in certain churches, but they weren't appealing to some arbitrary New Testament that didn't exist yet.
You find out about Jesus in the Old Testament, actually. Yes.
Yeah, what do you mean you don't find out about Jesus in the Old Testament? It wasn't Jesus or Christ incarnating in the theophanies? The theophanies weren't Christ, the second person of the Godhead, coming into time and space in the Old Testament? It wasn't Christ being prophesied by Isaiah in the Psalms and throughout throughout the Old Testament, Malachi 1:11. Cliffe is being entirely dismissive here, and you notice his attitude is totally different when he's being pushed back on. When someone just sits there and just swallows up his propaganda, that's what I call it. His theology is essentially just propaganda. He's totally kind and amiable and easy to talk to, and he explains things, and he's very patient and sometimes long-winded, as I go into in my breakdown of one of his interactions. But the moment he gets pushback from another Christian, boom, he's off to the races, and he is aggressive.
Jesus was prophesied in the Old Testament, just like the book of Isaiah 50.
Oh yeah, prophesized. That doesn't matter. Who do you think the apostles? What do you think the apostles were appealing to? Again, we could go over this point. I could smack this in the face of him 10 ways to Sunday. He's not the point. Now, I think the guy who is speaking here, Orthodox Loner, is a slightly off kilter, just slightly. And what do I mean by slightly off kilter? I think his approach here is he should have dropped the point after he made that point and then moved on and said, my issue, Cliff, is that your focus is all on this kind of generic follow Jesus. But then when we ask, well, what does it mean to follow Jesus? And then we look at the Old Testament and we look at the New Testament and we look at the people who compiled them, who appealed to them and what they believed, it doesn't seem to purport with what you're believing. That's where I would have gone to immediately, the moment he started interrupting. So
53, Psalm 21.
If you don't answer my question, you're going to have to get on to the next. I'm going to have to get on to the next.
I'm answering your question. You're asking.
No, you're not. What do you mean? He's answering the question. He clearly is answering the question. Not the way you like it, but he's answering.
Old Testament question is prophecy.
What do you want me to believe?
The Old Testament.
Wait. What do you want me to believe? Well, we would like you to affirm the same beliefs, teachings, and core doctrines that the early church fathers did. So saying, what do you want me to believe, is not a good question. And this is why Cliffe is not a good pastor. Because he's not actually pastoring people. He's giving them a very generic, surface-level Christianity. And it doesn't actually address these core contentions. Now we're going to skip ahead here to the part where Jay starts reacting. Hold on.
Really tough.
So we're skipping ahead to the part where Jay starts reacting to Cliff.
Atheists and stuff.
Real Bible is.
So when they're brought arguments such as, like what we bring to the table, they get really mad so freaking fast.
Yes.
They lose their temper so fast, and then they start dodging questions, like as if they're, I don't even know what. Like,
it's the same with the Roman Catholics. I think that. Tell me if this is the clip. I'm going to play it.
Tell us.
I would say that the Bible,
Yeah.
which is the Septuagint, the one that the apostles held to, is the one that is the true Bible. Right. But the apostles, when they were spreading the gospel,
Yes.
which is, by the way, the oral gospel, of course, written way later.
Let's get to your point.
The Septuagint is the Bible that the church held to.
How come Cliffe Knechtle can be rude and mean, but I can't be mean?
Hey man, he was taking notes from you, bro.
That's funny.
Yes, the Septuagint is
Like, why is he's like bent over on his knees? Like, why?
And again, the reason he's bent over on his knees is because he's almost talking down towards somebody. It's like he can't even believe what they're saying, and so he has to listen in and be like, "Oh, little child, let me look down at you." It's a very demeaning way of interacting with somebody. Anyways, Jay basically affirms everything this guy's saying and goes on to agree with him. And I think that that is really the point that needs to be driven home here. Long story short, it's a pretty rough thing that we're seeing here. It demonstrates that Cliff and people like that are only interested in spreading generic Christianity, and generic Christianity is what has gotten America and the West to the point where it is, where there's no meaningful like foundation stone for these people, and you're just throwing them into the deep end of the pool for spiritual warfare and not giving them any tools to combat it. None. So Cliff's methodology here, how long has he been doing this? I mean, Cliff's been around a long time. He's been around as long as, Ray Comfort almost. And what has he accomplished? I don't see a revival, right? And this is a problem. This is certainly a problem. It's kind of the same problem I have with people like Frank Turek, though I think Turek focuses more on answering like scientific issues and philosophy issues, which I think are important. He doesn't really direct people to a specific church style. That being said, it's still just very surface level, and I don't think it gets the depth that is needed. This is partially a criticism I would give to Charlie Kirk, though Charlie Kirk wasn't expressly a Christian apologist. He would tell people that Christ is the foundation stone and the root of a lot of my beliefs, and I believe that you should embrace Christ as well. But he never made it the core of I believe this expressly only for this purpose. He was explaining his personal anecdote, right? And so Charlie is a different beast altogether, in my opinion. And also, Charlie was clearly willing to engage with these kind of thought experiments and stuff like that. Cliff was clearly not interested. And it's probably due to the fact that, again, the video is cut off. It doesn't actually show Cliff's son struggling greatly with this question. Cliff, whenever he feels his son is getting in over his head, will interrupt immediately. I've seen it many, many times. So that's where we're at, guys. Anyways, I'm going to call it quits here. It's been about 12 minutes, so have a nice day, and please like, share, and subscribe.